What? He's crazy. He thinks he is Santa Claus.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is part 8 of my Twilight Zone exploration. And actually, this is a good one. So, I'm looking at all 156 episodes of the original series, and I'm taking them 6 episodes at a time. So I'm going to end up with 26 videos looking at every episode. And actually, this little batch of 6 episodes hasn't got a weak one amongst them. I think these are really good episodes. One of them is one of my all-time favourites, but actually all the rest of them are good episodes. So, it's a nice little batch, and if you do come across these episodes, definitely worth watching. And yeah, it's part 8, so I'm getting through the 2nd season now. So, it starts off with an absolute classic Richard Matheson story called Nick of Time. Okay, so Nick of Time begins with this opening narration. The hand belongs to Mr. Don S. Carter, male member of a honeymoon team en route across the Ohio countryside to New York City. In one moment, they will be subjected to a gift most humans never receive in a lifetime. For 1 penny, they will be able to look into the future. The time is now. The place is a little diner in Ridgeview, Ohio, and what this young couple doesn't realize is that this town happens to lie on the outskirts of the Twilight Zone. Okay, so Nick of Time is a fantastic performance from William Shatner. So William Shatner does appear in 2 episodes of the Twilight Zone. He appears in this one, and very famously appears in Nightmare at 20,000 Feet later on in the series. But this is an awesome first appearance. It's an awesome first appearance. It's written by Richard Matheson, and basically this is about a man who is stuck in this town with his wife because his car broke down and his car's going to take 4 hours to get fixed. And in those 4 hours they go to a cafe, and while they're at the cafe they see a fortune-telling machine, and that's called the Mystic Seer. And it only costs a penny, and they keep putting a penny in, or he keeps putting a penny in, and it tells him the future. And basically, this is an exercise in somebody starting to get addicted to this information that this fortune-telling machine is going to tell him, and he slowly gets more and more driven to find out what this fortune-telling machine is going to tell him about these questions he's asking. And all these questions are all yes and no answers, so they have to be very specific questions. So really the answers are quite vague as well, and that's what his wife's trying to tell him. But he's getting more and more driven to do this. There's this compulsion, this addiction that gets created quite quickly, and he's a very superstitious character that's running through the whole episode. And it's just brilliantly written, really, really subtly acted by William Shatner. It's not overdone at all. His wife's awesome as well. It's a fantastic episode, and his character is like derailed and preoccupied by this fortune-telling machine in a really realistic way. The dialogue is brilliant, and the last moment of the episode, I won't tell you what happens because it'll spoil it, but it's a perfect ending to this story. Perfect ending. So that's Nick of Time. The next episode in this little batch is the Lateness of the Hour. And Lateness of the Hour starts with this opening narration. The residence of Dr. William Lauren, which is in reality a menagerie for machines. We're about to discover that sometimes the product of man's talent and genius can walk amongst us untouched by the normal ravages of time. These are Dr. Lauren's robots, built to functional as well as artistic perfection. But in a moment, Dr. Lauren, wife and daughter, will discover that perfection is relative, that even robots have to be paid for, and very shortly we'll be shown exactly what is the bill. So this is a Rod Serling story, and this is a really interesting episode that, I tell you what, all these 6 episodes have got a really interesting development of settings and subject matters and character interaction that's not necessarily been done before on the Twilight Zone. So it's really interesting. And this has got a really chilling beginning. And it's a daughter that's frustrated in her house because you've got this really odd setup where her parents are in this perfect house. They never go out. Everything is laid out for them. And they've got about 5 or 6 different staff to look after them, different maids and butlers. And their daughter's really frustrated and actually gets really angry with their situation and demands that the situation changes. And she wants all the domestic staff removed. She wants them to live a normal life. She wants them to go out, and she wants to discover what it's like to be a woman, and she can't because she's stuck in the house. And it's just a fantastic story with a really cool ending. One of the interesting things about this as well is because it's filmed on videotape. There were 6 episodes that were filmed on videotape, and that changed the options that they had for filming. It gave them less options. So the 6 episodes that they created on videotape, they wrote them in a way that meant there was less direction needed, less different angles, less sets, and that kind of thing. And actually, from the point of view of what my situation now, having them decades later on Blu-ray, the quality isn't as good. The actual quality of the image isn't as good. So that's interesting. But yeah, there's 6 episodes that they filmed on videotape, literally to make it cheaper. So just to save money. And because the process was more like producing a play, they hired directors who were used to directing theatrical performances for those episodes. So I think that's kind of interesting. But yeah, Lateness of the Hour is a really good episode that still has a punch now, even though well, actually, I don't know if you would see I don't know you'd necessarily see the twist come in. I don't know. Maybe not. But yeah, really, really cool episode. The 3rd episode in this little batch is The Trouble with Templeton. And Trouble with Templeton starts with this opening narration. Pleased to present for your consideration Mr. Booth Templeton, serious and successful star of over 30 Broadway plays, who is not quite all right today. Yesterday and its memories is what he wants, and yesterday is what he'll get. Soon his years and his troubles will descend on him in an avalanche. In order not to be crushed, Mr. Booth Templeton will escape from his theatre and his world and make his debut on another stage in another world that we call the Twilight Zone. This one's written by E. Jack Newman. So this is the first time he's appeared as a writer for the show. And it's a really interesting story. It's very unpredictable. And basically this character called Templeton is an actor who's quite disillusioned with his life. It starts off with him watching his wife having a fling or an affair, and he's like saying to his kind of butler kind of character, oh, she's got another one now. And he's very indifferent about it. And he says to his butler that he fell out of love with her many years ago. There's not really, and actually doesn't even remember whether he ever did love her. So he's got this sort of indifferent attitude to his life. And when he gets to the rehearsals for the play that he's in, it all changes, and he ends up running off after being chastised by the new director, who's actually played by Sidney Pollack, which was really interesting. He plays this small part, and Sidney Pollack's obviously a famous director and actor. But anyway, he runs off. And what's really different about this episode is that he runs off into a Twilight Zone created fantasy situation that relates to his past, and that fantasy setting kicks him out of it. So I think that's really interesting. And he basically gets rejected by this alternative past. So yeah, it's a different kind of story. So yeah, I really think that it's a different take on what Twilight Zone's done before, and it's really fresh and interesting. So the next episode is another Rod Serling episode called A Most Unusual Camera. A Most Unusual Camera begins with this opening narration. A hotel suite that in this instance serves as a den of crime, the aftermath of a rather minor event to be noted on a police blotter, an insurance claim, perhaps a 3-inch box on page 12 of the evening paper. Small addenda to be added to the list of the loot, a camera, a most unimposing addition to the flotsam and jetsam that it came with. Hardly worth mentioning really, because cameras are cameras, some expensive, some purchasable at 5 and dime stores. But this camera, this one's unusual, because in just a moment we'll watch it inject itself into the destinies of 3 people. It happens to be a fact that the pictures that it takes can only be developed in the Twilight Zone. And The Most Unusual Camera is a really, really good episode. Again, I really like this little batch. But this has got a different kind of energy. I think they're trying different things now in the Twilight Zone. And now and again, you might get an episode which feels very similar to an old episode or something like that. But some of these episodes are really different. And it's got a different tone. It's got a different energy to it. Different acting style. And I was quite surprised when I checked while I was watching it that Rod Serling had written it, because Rod Serling usually writes the very sentimental, intense and reflective episodes. And this is about 2 thieves, hoodlums, criminals who, from a heist, they're looking at this heist, they've just had this heist, and what they come away with, one of the things they come away with is this camera. And this camera, they think is just a normal camera, but they discover early on in the episode that it can predict the future. And there's a 3rd character that comes into the story, and the 3 of them have to figure out what they're going to do with this camera. And the way that the banter bounces off the 3 characters is fantastic. There's a moment where the main character, who's brilliantly played by an actor I didn't know, but he starts going on about the fact that he's going to do something for humanity now that he's got this camera, and like his girlfriend or wife, or the moral of the situation is going, well, what's humanity ever done for us? And he's like, no, we can do some great things with this camera. And he's like being really noble. And then he hears the sound of racehorses and racing happening on the TV. And he's like, oh, hold on a minute, we can make money. And the 3rd character says to him, well, what about humanity? And then he says, well, what's humanity ever done for us? It's just brilliant the way it's out. There's a light tone to it. It's quite funny, but it's buzzing with energy. I love it. So yeah, it's a really, really good story. And obviously it's a Twilight Zone, and these criminals lose. And the way that they lose is through a 4th character coming into it. And it's a little bit contrived, but it's fun. And yeah, the best thing about it is the dialogue. And it's definitely one of the really good episodes, I think. A Most Unusual Camera. Okay, so the next one is one that I think probably gets shown separately in America, I think. I've heard that this gets shown at Christmas. It's the Twilight Zone Christmas episode called Night of the Meek. Night of the Meek begins with this opening narration. This is Mr. Henry Corwin, normally unemployed, who once a year takes the lead role in a uniquely American institution, that of department store Santa Claus in a road company version of The Night Before Christmas. But in just a moment, Mr. Henry Corwin will enter a strange kind of North Pole, which is one part the wondrous spirit of Christmas and one part the magic that can only be found in the Twilight Zone. So Night of the Meek is written by Rod Serling again, and it's about a department store Santa Claus. And the department store Santa Claus is played by Art Carney. And Art Carney is a really interesting actor as far as his filmography. So he's most famous for being playing opposite Jackie Gleason in The Honeymooners. But he's also appeared with the Muppets twice, which is pretty cool. He was also in the Star Wars Holiday Special, which is really cool. And he was in 2 episodes of the original series of Batman, playing a villain called the Archer. So, yeah, an interesting actor from that point of view, and one of the many actors that becomes really famous after the Twilight Zone. And He plays a really, really good character. He's basically an alcoholic department store Santa Claus that's lost his motivation. He's lost his faith in people. He's lost his belief in Christmas, and he says that he just wants the kids to feel good about Christmas, to not feel the clamp of poverty all the time, and to feel happy on Christmas. And, you know, he just keeps saying he wishes that would happen, he wishes that would happen. And he gets the chance to be Santa Claus, to actually be Santa Claus during the episode. And it's just lovely. It's really lovely. It's a very sentimental, beautiful, heartfelt, emotive episode. And definitely a real classic. So Night of the Meek is a really good one. And then the last one in this batch, again, a very different setting, different atmosphere, different tone to it, but very classic Twilight Zone as well. And it's an episode called Dust. And the opening narration of Dust is this. There was a village built of crumbling clay and rotting wood, and it squatted ugly under the broiling sun like a sick and mangy animal waiting to die. This village had a virus, shared by its people. It was the germ of squalor, of hopelessness, of a loss of faith. For the faithless, the hopeless, the misery-laden, there is time, ample time, to engage in one of the other pursuits of men. They begin to destroy themselves. So Dust is written by Rod Serling, and basically it's a story of a man who has accidentally killed a little girl, and the town has decided to, well, just in the law, that he's going to be hanged for it. It's set in the past, and it's all about sort of the day of the hanging, if you like. And there's a couple of things that are really interesting about it. One of the things that I think is interesting is the way it's directed. And the director has chosen to create a town that is completely bereft of energy and purpose. And everybody in this town just looks like they have no will to do anything. And the sheriff especially has got this flippant lack of drive about him, and it's really interesting to see. It's a really unique setup, and this is all wrapped up in this hanging that's going to happen. And I think it takes a brave show and a brave writer to write a story that's so blatantly anti-capital punishment, anti-hanging. It must have ruffled feathers at the time. It must have done. So the general point of the episode is the immoral element to hanging this man. And it's a big statement from the show. It's a big statement from Rod Serling. And it's quite a powerful episode. And, you know, it uses this man who's trying to manipulate the father of the guy being hanged. It uses this guy that's going to manipulate this man as the device that the Twilight Zone is manipulating. So yeah, it's a really, really good and unique and different episode with an important message and a really emotional set of characters. You know, very emotional scenes that really do work and don't feel dated. So yeah, and a really, really cool batch of 6 episodes that just, you know, continue to show the great quality in the second season. So there we go. See you next time. Stay curious.
Of what it's like to be you. You sit up on your high chair